Lamentations 3:37 to 5:22, the second half of the book. Well, the poet is so beautiful in the Bible. I often enjoy his word pictures and how he takes images and just turns them beautifully. Here's one in Lamentations 5:1. Remember, O Lord, what has come upon us. Look and behold our reproach. Our inheritance has been turned over to aliens and our houses to foreigners. We have become orphans and waifs. Our mothers are like widows. We pay for the water we drink, and our wood comes at a price. We have a fire-burning stove in our house, and we enjoy long winter fires. I can't imagine paying for the wood that I'm burning, and that's the story that we hear about by the poet in this book of Lamentations, which is, again, about looking back over the destruction of Jerusalem and the utter pain that the people were feeling. Well, let's talk about a question that came up in one of our monthly Zoom calls, and that is the practice of Lectio Divina. Now, there are a lot of ways to read the Bible. In fact, our video series is reflective of one or two of those ways to study the Bible. In this case, with what I'm doing is often asking, what did the original writer mean by what he said? And thus going to the ancient Near Eastern ideas that are there and taking them for what is right in front of us, as it were, and then also looking for the bigger story that text is giving us. Lectio Divina is another way to read the Bible, and it actually goes back to the 6th century. It's a monastic approach. It's a contemplative approach. The purpose of Lectio Divina, which comes as Latin, or comes from the Latin meaning sacred reading. The idea that, or the goal was to promote contemplative individual prayer that would reflect upon the reader's union with God through the text, and it became known as Lectio Divina, sacred reading. Here is how it's evolved into today's patterns that some have learned in several steps here. It begins with a simple prayer of speak, Lord, for your servant hears. So you spend a few moments just praying that God would speak to you through the text as you read it. Then it would be a small portion or a text that you would take, and you would begin to repeat that text slowly. So a small portion of the text, not a large chapter or 3 chapters like we've been doing, but just a phrase. And you begin to repeat that text to oneself slowly over and over. You then start to become attentive to how that text, you pay attention to certain words and phrases and how they become resonant in your mind, or how these texts resonate themselves along in your thinking. So notice again how meditative this practice is. At that point, and again, not that all other versions of Bible reading would do this too, but you specifically start to see and ask yourself how your heart and your emotions, not really your intellect, but how your heart and will are responding to these words that you have been repeating to yourself. You then meditate on this, and you can even become rather creative in how you meditate. Imagine yourself being in the story that you're reading. It's often described as a time of holy imagination, and you douse yourself into the story and just see where that story takes you. Importantly, 2 more thoughts. You begin to dialogue with God about it and talk with Him. What do you want me to hear in my reading of your sacred text? Lastly would be action. What would I do with this? What does this lead me to believe all the more? What does it lead me to correct about my life? What kind of contentment should I be experiencing from this text, or peace? How do I live out this text? So that is the practice. That's the ancient practice of Lectio Divina, sacred reading. What about this? We talked about this on our call, but let me just mention some things now that I've had some time to think about it some more. There are some pros, some positives about this, I certainly would say. I like the idea that we're talking about a sacred text, and any reading of the Bible that believes that the text is sacred, I think, is a is a positive thing. It's not like any other book. We don't treat the Bible like every other book on our shelf, right? Secondly, I love the idea that it is a time-consuming kind of reading. You don't rush. You take your time. Anything, again, where you spend time is good. It involves the heart. And again, not that this is the only kind of reading that would do this, but I like it for its very purposeful desire to draw your heart and your emotions into the reading. When I think of the Psalms, for example, I often just find myself feeling what the author is feeling, and not really asking the what questions, but the how, the why, the how does this make me feel? To me, that's one of the purposes of poetry. And remember, a lot of the Old Testament is poetic, including the prophets that we've been reading. And the purpose of poetry is often to attack a person's heart, or get at a person's heart before they get just simply at the mind. It's good to obviously meditate, but I like this too, that it emphasizes the personhood of God, the relational aspect of God. We never want to study the Bible not believing that God is very alive, very active, and wants to be a part of our life. It's very participatory, and I like that. And maybe I'm saying the same thing in two ways. Well, actually, that gets into this issue of action, that until I do something with the text, with my life. Now, it doesn't have to be go out and physically do things, but actually take that text into my day in some real way. So that's some of the positives that I would recommend that we think of when we think of Lectio Divina. I've tried it myself. I've enjoyed it to various degrees. Now, here are a couple of things I'd say to watch for, however, just three things that come to mind. It can be very subjective. You can go adrift quite quickly from the meaning of the author, to where if the author was looking over your shoulder, you might be thinking of words that in English he never thought of. So that would be one issue to be aware of. It does, interestingly, I think what we have to realize, it presumes when you read the text and you go down this path, what you're already doing is presuming the story that you're working with. In other words, let's call it for what it is. It's sacred reading. It's not really Bible study. So I would just keep that difference maybe in mind, that this is a kind of reading you would do on the text where you presume that you already know the story of, the larger scope of the picture of a book, for example, or the story that the book is telling. And so let's call it for what it is. This is a reading of a text, not really a Bible study of a text. And one more, see if this matches your thoughts. I have noticed that, yes, there is, think of other types of Bible study where it's maybe more academic and get into Greek and Hebrew and all those kinds of things. There can be pressure on our minds that I'm not doing it well enough, or this is hard, shall we say. I found this also to in a sense have a pressure point, and that is right here. What if I don't perform emotionally with the text? What if I read a text one day, and this has happened numerous times to me. I read a text and it just does nothing for me. My mind is adrift, or it's in Jeremiah, or it's in Lamentations, where the subject is not really to make me feel happy sometimes, it's to make me feel like I'm in a funeral dirge. Well, that's the challenge. I think one of the challenges of this kind of reading is that it can be pressurized, in the sense of you need that sometimes you feel you need to respond emotionally to a text in a good way when the text is not asking that of you. So there will be times that I think are just fine when you read the Bible and you walk away saying, well, Lord, I didn't feel anything today, but I know you're there. I know you want me to go about my day in faithfulness and wisdom and so forth. And I'll see you tomorrow as I continue to study my Bible. But I didn't get much out of that reading today. I think this kind of reading can sometimes overemphasize that to our, maybe too much. And so, but again, I enjoy this kind of reading, and I just wanted to, again, introduce it to you if you're not part of the call that we had, and give it a try, see if it works for you.